Hello, this is Mr. Vargas, and in this video, I'm going to go over the StepTracker free response question. This question was from the 2019 AP CSA exam, and I have a few documents open. Right here, I have the question itself. So on the day of the exam, the students received this question, and they took their time, they read it through, and then down here, they wrote the response. I also have the rubric, and I will be referring to the rubric as I work on this program. The reason I'm doing this is I really want to, I want to give you a sense of how the scoring works. And also one thing that I think is important for you to know is that you can actually earn a lot of points for some pretty basic kind of just setup. So even if you are confused with one of the questions, I think it's in your best interest to not leave things blank, because you're going to see, even if you don't understand this question, you could still earn a lot of the points from just kind of doing, just like I said, basic setup. So let's jump into this question. This question involves the implementation of a fitness tracking system that is represented by the StepTracker class. So that's what you're writing. You're writing, write the complete StepTracker class, including the constructor and any instance variables and methods. So that's what your problem is. You got to write this class. A StepTracker object is created with a parameter that defines the minimum number of steps that must be taken for a day to be considered active. Now, right away, you read that sentence and you might not be exactly sure what they're asking for. And I find that's pretty common with these questions. They're kind of like puzzles, and I find that it helps to just read through the entire thing and then go back and then read it. And I think some of the earlier parts will make more sense once you've read some of the later parts. But anyways, so let's keep going. The StepTracker class provides a constructor and the following methods. So we have 3 methods that we need to do. Add daily steps. This will accumulate information about steps in readings taken once per day. So again, that's kind of ambiguous. Accumulates information. Like and in fact, I kind of struggled with this one. Not struggled, but when I started doing my solution, I wasn't exactly sure what information I needed to calculate. And what I did when I was working on this on my own was I started this one and then I skipped it, completed it, and then went back. And I'm actually gonna do that today, because besides just giving you the answer, like, everything is easy once you know the answer. I think the more important thing is for me to model my thought process, so that just because sometimes the best way to tackle these problems is not always necessarily in a linear fashion. So anyways, add daily steps. That one was, like I said, I was a little unclear in the beginning, and then it made more sense as I did the later parts. You have active days. This returns the number of active days. Average steps. This returns the average number of steps, which you get by calculating the total number of steps divided by the number of days tracked. And then you get this table over here, and this table is very important. This is a sample code execution. So this is like a runner. So they're creating the StepTracker object over here, and they're calling all of these methods on the StepTracker object, and then it tells you notes about what's going on in the background. And also, if the method returns something, it will tell you what it returns. So you need to use this information along with these descriptions to code the correct StepTracker class. So I think when you do when I went to do this on my own, I stopped and I looked at these line by line to figure out what it's doing. But to save time, I'm not gonna do that, because like I said, I just don't want this video to get too long. I am gonna tackle this part in kind of a linear way. But one thing that's important to know is that this is all one program. It's not like each line is a separate program. So like down here, when you calculate average steps, it's calculating the number of average steps after all this code was run. But let's get started. So you get this question, and right away you're not sure where to start. Don't panic, right? Do what you know, right? They told us we got to write the StepTracker class, so let's do that. Public class StepTracker. All right. And all right, we finally got we have something on the paper. All right, let's do the constructor, right? So the step track, so look down here, step tracker TR equals new step tracker 10,000. So we know the constructor takes in a integer, right? And they even tell you up here, step tracker object is created with a parameter that defines the the minimum number of steps for a day to be considered active. So in this example down here, when they create the step tracker, they put in 10,000. So that means that days with at least 10,000 steps are considered active. So let's create our constructor. Public. So constructor is always public. They don't have any return type, and they always have the same name as the class. So public step tracker. And we know we need a parameter, right? They're sending in the value 10,000. So let's put in a parameter. So int, and you can name it whatever you want. You can name it X if you want. That's not a very descriptive name, but you can, and you don't lose any points for bad or unclear, maybe like yeah, I guess unclear naming. But again, you don't want your question to be so unclear that the person reading it can't understand. But that's fine right there. So int X, and at this point, I'm gonna pause because guess what? We have earned our first point. So over here, you have the scoring rubric. The questions are at like every free response question, it's out of 9 points. And if you look over here on the constructor, you get 1 point for declaring the header, public, step tracker, int, and then blank because you can name the variable whatever you want. So we have 1 of the points. All right, so this variable is supposed to set the minimum number of steps. And so right away, this is information that this class is going to use. You're going to use minimum number of steps in some of the other methods. So we're going to create an instance variable for that. So private int, and you can call it min steps maybe. Private int min steps. And whenever we use the constructor, we're going to set min steps to X. And I'll stop again because we have now earned another point. Use parameter and appropriate values to initialize instance variables. And this is under constructor. So this is, if you use this information to set a instance variable properly. So we have 2 points so far. And we are done with the constructor. All right. So we have our constructor. Now let's begin working on the methods. So let's start with add daily steps. So add daily steps. It's let's see what we know about this method. So add daily steps. Look over here, they use add daily steps. It says blank if no value. So add daily steps doesn't return anything. So public, so no return, so void. And it's called add daily steps. And again, add daily steps takes in a value, just like the parameter. I mean, just like the constructor. So int, yeah, again, you can call it whatever you want. You can call it steps if you want. Public, you could call it X if you want. And so then this is, so actually, yeah, I want to pause right here because guess what? We've earned another point. Did you declare, you get a point for declaring the header for add daily steps. So public void add daily steps int X or int whatever you want to call it, and I called it steps, and that's fine. And now this is where I was a little unclear. I wasn't sure. So when you add daily steps, it says this is too few steps to be active. I wasn't exactly sure like all of the calculations I was supposed to do here. So I'm gonna pause right here and I'm gonna go back to add daily steps in a little bit. All right, so I'm gonna go to active days, and because active days is more straightforward to me, returns the number of active days. So public, and this one returns, right? What does it return? Let's see. Active days, it returns a 0 over here, returns a 1 over here, returns a 2 over here. Active days returns an int, right? Because that makes sense. Days are usually measured in whole numbers. So public int active days. And this is going to return the number of active days. So we know we need a variable to keep track of the active days. So private int active days. And in here, we're just going to return active days. So this is really just and in fact, you know what? I don't like that it's the same name as the class. So I'm going to call it num, or as the method, I'm going to call it num active days. So at this point, we got another point, declares and implements public int active days. All right, so that one was pretty simple. It just returns a whole number, and let's keep going. So average steps. So this one will return the average number of steps per day calculated by dividing the total number of steps taken by the number of days tracked. Okay, so calculated by the total. So you need to know the total number of steps taken and the number of days tracked. And if you look up here, we don't have total number of days. We have active days and we have minimum steps. Minimum steps is just the minimum you need to have an active day. So again, you can tackle this different ways. What I did was I just went up here and I just added those two instance variables because I know I'm going to need them. So private int, let's see, it was total steps. So we need to know the total steps. And then we also need to know the total days, private int, so num days, because you have active days and then you just have the total number of days because not all of the days are active. And let's look over here when we've used active days. So actually not active days. Which one are we doing now? We're doing average steps. So let's look over here when we've used average steps. So average steps over here return to 0. Average steps over here return, because this is, at this point, we haven't had any, we haven't had any steps or any days yet. Let's go down here. Average steps. At this point, it returns 7,000. Why? Because we've done add daily steps twice. So that kind of lets you know whenever you do add daily steps, the num days needs to go up by 1. And also, whenever you do add daily steps, as you can see, it's keeping track of the total number because we added 9 and we added 5. And now average steps is returning 14 divided by 2. So it's keeping track of all the steps. So as you can see, as I'm doing the other ones, as I'm doing the other methods, add daily steps is starting to make sense what it's supposed to do. So let's do public int. Actually, no, this one's not an int, right? Look, if you look over here, average steps returns a double. So public double average steps, and it returns the total number of steps, so total steps, by the total number of days. So return total steps divided by the num days, the total number of days. All right, so so let's see, where are we at now? Let's see, average steps declares the header public double average steps. That's correct, so we got a point for that. And then it returns the double. Ooh, so we actually have a problem. Returns the calculated double average number of steps. Why do we have a problem? Total steps is an int. Num days is an int. When you divide an int by an int, you get an integer. So this needs to be a double. The simplest way to do that is to just cast it. So we've done this a couple times. To cast the value, just write the word double. and it will turn this into a decimal point value. And you only have to do it to one of the numbers, one of the variables. Once one of them is a double, the whole thing will evaluate to a double. Be careful though, don't do this. If you do this, it will calculate this. You'll get the wrong type of, like how when you do 5 divided by 2, if those are both integers, you end up getting a 2. But if it was 5.0 divided by 2, you would get 2.5, right? We want the correct answer, but the problem is you're doing the division before you turn one of them into a double. So you're doing 5 divided by 2, and you'll get the incorrect answer 2. And what you want to do is this, because when you do this, now the 5 becomes 5.0, and now when you do 5.0 divided by 2, you'll get the correct value. So returns the calculated double average number of steps. So at this point we have 6 of the 9 points, and we're well above the average, by the way. Like, some of this might seem a little tough, but just to give you an idea, right here I have the average scores for the various years, and StepTracker, the average score was a 4.9. So this is out of 9. So, and if you see, that's pretty typical. Most of these questions, sometimes you have even lower averages, 2.59, 3.42, but the average on this was 4.9. So if this is what you have well over the average. But let's go finish up add daily steps now that I kind of have an idea how this works, right? So add daily steps. When you use add daily steps, we know we need to keep track of the total steps, right? Whether the day was active or not. Because for average steps to work, every time you record steps, you need to add that. So total steps will go up by the value being sent in here. So total steps equals total steps plus steps. Okay. The other thing is, this is only done once per day, right? Add daily steps, I think it says here, accumulates information about steps in readings taken once per day. So whenever you use add daily steps, the number of days needs to go up by 1. So num days plus plus. And then finally, whenever you add steps, right? Whenever you add steps, if the steps was over 10,000, actually, I shouldn't say 10,000. If it's over min steps, then the number of active days goes up by 1. All right. So when you start thinking this through, pay attention to your language. Notice I said the word if, right? So if steps is greater than min steps, I guess I should say greater than or equal to min steps, right? Because when you created the StepTracker object, that determines what the minimum number of steps needed to have an active day. So whenever steps is greater than min steps, not only does days go up by 1, but also active days. So num active days goes up by 1. And that is it. So this is all the information that they wanted you to calculate. And you might be able to, you might not have to do this kind of in the backwards way that I did. I just was a little unclear. But when you see this, now this will all make sense, right? Active days. So you create a new step tracker with 10,000 steps as the minimum number of steps needed for a day to be active. If you do active days, you get a 0. If you get average steps, you get a 0. You add daily steps, right? So when you add daily steps, total steps goes up to 9,000, number of days goes up by 1, and active days stays 0 because 9,000 is not active. Then you add daily steps again. Now we're going to increase total steps. It had 9,000 in it, but now it's going to have 14. The number of days goes up to 2. We still don't have any active days, so active days returns a 0. And then over here, when you do average steps, now we have 14,000 divided by 2, right? Because we've been tracking it. And then you add steps again, and now daily steps. So now your total number of steps will go up by 13, and your number of days goes up by 1. but this time your active days also goes up by 1. And so you should, once you're done with your solution, you should go back and kind of follow this through and make sure that it works. And at this point, you have a 9, right? You have 9 out of 9. We've declared the header. So public void add daily steps, int steps. And again, like just look at this, right? If you do the header for your, so if you just do this line right here, you got a point for that. You do this line correctly, right? You get a point for that. You do, this method is just a getter method. You do that, you get a point for that. And then declares the header, again, just you get a point for just doing the header. So even if all this logic stuff is, you don't get it, right? You have a question, you just don't get what they're asking for, you're able to get 4 of the points from just doing the headers for the methods and doing this simple getter method, right? So that's pretty much it. Hopefully this explanation helped it make a little bit of sense. You can rewatch this video a couple times if you need to. I would practice writing out the solution so you can just get used to writing an answer out. But yep, this is the 2019 StepTracker class solution. So hopefully this helps you. Thank you. Bye.